Hey, this is episode 2 of Backyard Wealth.
Is it just me, or do days go by really quickly? It feels like it was just yesterday we had last week's podcast.
No, I think you're just excited to see me and have a chat with me about this stuff. So that's all. That's why time flies. Always fun with you. All right. So episode 2. On the first episode, we introduced why we wanted to do Backyard Wealth, what it's all going to be about. I think I've gotten a pretty decent response from it. I've got some questions and comments, and I think we'll go over them. But on this episode, me and Ali really wanted to focus on uh, why and who these backyard suites, these garden suites, laneway suites, whatever you want to call them, who they would be
Accessory
most,
dwelling units,
yeah, accessory dwelling units,
ADUs,
ADUs, all these technical terms that are out there that confuse people.
ARUs, whatever it is.
Basically, who would want a second house on their property? Plain and simple, I think that's all we're talking about. Who would this be for? So we'll go over through some maybe potential individuals, their needs, and we'll also go over a small case study that Ali did on a site, and then we'll take it from there. We'll let this organically go like we always do. Again, we'll do a brief introduction. My name's Abhishek Basine with Remax Realtron and Team Power. I'm a realtor here in Toronto for the last 15 years. My father's been in the business for 35 years. I met Ali at the Schulich School of Business Masters of Real Estate and Infrastructure program, where we created a big bond. I'll let Ali do his own introduction.
Sure, and I'm Ali Salmani. I'm the VP of Operations at Atena Building Group. We're a full-service design, build, construction company here in the GTA. And just like Abby, I've been working with my father, who started the company when we came to Canada back in 2002, 2003, actually. And he's been a developer even before I was born. He started his own his first development project at the age of 19. And so I have a lot of shoes to fill, but with as Abby mentioned, Abby and I actually created a bond right away because at the time we were both in the real estate profession as well. So there's a lot of things that we connected over throughout the time. We partnered and created a really good bond. So what we are hoping to do here is to transfer some of those compatibilities and be able to take our knowledge and transfer it over to you so that you're better equipped when you're making decisions around your investments.
Yeah, exactly. On a lighter note, I just thought of something. Maybe we should create a whole new podcast of what it feels like to work with our fathers. I think that's another great idea that we can go at. We can
That's a good one.
we can open up Pandora's box there. All right. So let's talk about who these accessory dwellings, these additional homes would be good for. One of the questions actually I got after our first episode was, oh yeah, you know what? These properties, they only make sense downtown. It must be just for downtown properties. And I'm going to let you answer that one because I know you feel strongly about this and you know what's happening across the city in terms of where these homes are being developed. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that statement, obviously. And part of it is because of just land planning and how the city of Toronto has been very active in terms of getting more housing built. There's a lot more jobs in the city, employment levels, the percentage of people that wanting to work in the city are much higher when you compare to other areas in the rural residential areas. That being said, though, it's not 100% fact that yes, it only makes sense in Toronto. Toronto has the best rental rates. Toronto's bylaws are by far more, they allow more buildable square footage outside of other areas. Part of it, I think, is planning. There's a lot of politics behind that, and that's something we can maybe touch on later on. But that doesn't mean that if you go outside of Toronto, if you come north to York Region, if you go to Mississauga, if you go all the way to the east, Whitby, Milton, we're not facing a housing need. There's also housing that's required all across the different municipalities within the Greater Toronto Area and beyond. So that being said, those municipalities, they're not allowing you to build as large of a facility, right? So whereas in Toronto, you can build 600 to 1,200, in other municipalities, you're building 600 or 400 square feet. So Um, I still see a lot of people that are looking and interested in building it, even in Markham, Richmond Hill, Aurora, Newmarket. There's actually been projects that we've walked and we've seen that they've built it and they're very satisfied with it. They're very happy because now they've added an additional income generating property. That's number one. And number two, some of them who want to basically use it for their own use, for their own needs, now have an additional space that just was unlocked through the bylaw changes in the past few years.
All right. But let's break the nuances of just Toronto alone. Are these accessory suites only profitable, only viable in downtown Toronto, or are you seeing other areas of Toronto also incorporate them, like Scarborough or Etobicoke?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. Let's look at it this way. There's two variations. There's the laneway suites and then there's the garden suites. They're both accessory dwelling units, right? The terminology is different, and then maybe what differentiates them is that there's only laneways, or majority of the laneways that are usable for this are in the downtown core areas. So that's just the city planning component, right? There are no laneways in Richmond Hill that are suitable for this, right? So it's just by design that Toronto has these laneways. But then when you expand it and you go into garden suites, which means properties that are fenced in on all three sides, that's across the whole city, right? So that's North York, that's Scarborough, that's Etobicoke. And right now, when you look at the numbers of permits that have been applied, Scarborough is just blowing up. Scarborough, because there's a lot of land, there's a lot of properties that have really good space for you to utilize. Scarborough has been taking advantage of it, and Etobicoke as well. Etobicoke in the South Queensgate area, and even Kingsway, there's been projects that have been coming up. As you know, Kingsway is a very affluent neighborhood, and most of those are for personal uses. But when you go a little bit more south to like Mimico area, fantastic opportunities for you to turn them into rental opportunity.
Yeah, so and I guess it plays largely into the demographics, right? We know that Scarborough's always and primarily has been a very strong focus for new immigrants to come in and rent there. Good school districts in most areas, there's ample amount of land and space, old wartime bungalows that have allowed for basement apartments, right? So I think Scarborough is the next step, next genesis of these garden suites. I didn't know that the real definition or the difference in definition between the garden suite and the laneway housing is just that a garden is fenced on three sides. And I think that's a simple way of explaining it, right? Our goal here is to make everything simple, and I think that's perfect. So, we spoke about, this was just one of the feedbacks I got from episode 1 was like, hey, this is probably not good for me because I'm not in downtown Toronto. But no, I like to pull up some articles, Ali. We can go over the headlines of just, other use cases that we're seeing across the city, and, where people are using garden suites now or laneway housing and for what reasons. And I think it's really interesting for our viewers to look at and say, maybe, you know what, this relates to them. Maybe they fall into one of these categories. All right. Okay, hold on. Let's do this. Another technical difficulty. Look, first time figuring all this stuff out.
Just while we're at it, while you're figuring that out, here's some cool stats that people should consider. So there's only about 40,000 homes in Toronto that are suitable or are on laneway streets, right?
Oh, that's
And
not a lot.
laneways are basically just a separate alleyway that you can access the back garage area. There's only about 40,000 of those across the entire city of Toronto. Compare it to over 250,000 homes that have garden suite capability, right? Oh, now I see it. Perfect. Yeah. So this was actually one of my, honestly, even though we didn't do it, it was one of my favorite projects because they took things to a different level, right? They've shown how these spaces could actually be turned into something that's both functional and also the design aspects of it. So you're ultimately building a very nice looking property, and you have the capacity to build it if your budget is permitting, to build something that's super nice, that's super livable. So it's not just some people think, oh, it's just a structure in the back or it's a shed in the back. No. You can implement all various different kinds of design elements, just especially in this case where he's built it for his parents, right? So if you want to get into it, and I'm sure you have a summary of what it is.
Yeah, what I found really interesting about this is that, this is a solution to multi-generational living. And,
Yes.
you know, I think North America, Canada, Ontario, Toronto, especially, we haven't had that type of culture of multi-generational living. But if you ask any immigrant, anybody who's lived in Asia, South Asia, Middle East, a lot of families, a lot of joint families, they live together. And, based on the way our homes have been constructed, based on the limited footprint of existing homes in established neighborhoods of Toronto, it's
Yes.
very hard to sometimes retrofit for a second, third family to come in to that home. And this is a great option to make sure that within the same budget, in $450,000, you couldn't retrofit a home to have another proper kitchen, laundry, right? Like do the extensions. That would be a lot more work than actually just building a separate unit. I actually thought that this was really interesting about this whole use case of using a garden suite for this purpose.
I think I can confidently say, and I'm gonna say it, like, you know me, I like to just spit it out there. There's probably no better way for you to achieve what you're looking for when it comes into living close by to your family members than this approach. There's no way, because one, time, in terms of the distance required, again, as we mentioned last time, they're within your arm's reach, but there's an element of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
They're in their own space. You're in your own space, right? But it's very easy to merge and come together. So that's number one. You don't have to travel and go to grandma's house who's living in a condo, and then there's this, there's that, various elements. Two, you have full control over how you build it, how much you build, what's the style, what's the finishing, what's the countertop, what's the flooring, how much lighting is in there, as opposed to going and buying a condominium. And again, this isn't really to bash anything. Those are all different great investment opportunities, but it's the reality of it. These are the benefits that you can design it. You can sit down with the architect and designer and the contractor and know exactly what you're going to get, as opposed to be given a set of options to choose from and be very limited, right?
No, I agree. And I think, this offers more flexibility. You're going to have some people who say, hey, why don't I just retrofit the basement that I have, right? And make it like an in-law suite or something that's more livable for family to come. But those also have limitations. Like you're building a new structure here. You get to design it practically any way you'd like. With basements, sometimes you have issues with ceiling heights. And sure, you can underpin. That's what some people might say. And I could dig down lower. But, you have concrete columns that you can't get rid of, right? You've got electrical issues that you've got to then start retrofitting. You may not be able to move the staircase coming from upstairs to help make the floor plans more efficient. But this way, you can design everything to your requirements and needs.
Absolutely. Exactly. And basements, when you touch an underpinning project anywhere in the city, you're over the six figures right now. And then that's just to do the underpinning. That's just to go down. With these garden suites, you're able to get a minimum height of at least 13, 14 feet if you're building one story, and about 20 feet if you're building 22 stories. So the height is it's incomparable. It's a separate structure, full privacy. There's no noise issues. Basements, they're great if you spend the money. But I always say, hey, spend the money outside and then work your way back into the main house.
Yeah. And look, people did that right here, right? You can just clearly see it's the New York Times, right? So we've made international news where if you can't afford a house in Toronto, which has been one of the driving issues in our society for the last 4 to 5 years, just build in your backyard, right? And this is now becoming something that's grabbing international attention because this could be a viable option in a lot of municipalities in North America. So I thought this was really interesting. Again, same use case. They want to move their parents and family into the backyard, but we've made international news.
Let me say this. ADUs and garden suites, if anything, Toronto has been behind in this whole game. Vancouver has been doing it for over 14 years. Other areas like California in the US have adopted ADUs for much longer than Toronto has. and is, right? There's been more activity. There's been a lot of finished products that have been there. And then I mean, if we want to stick to North America, that's fine. But if you go across the world, go to Asia, go to the Middle East, right? This is one of the main functions of adding densification in many of those other areas across the world. So
Yeah,
if
and
anything, GTA is very, very late to the game, but I'm glad that they've joined the party now.
well, I think we're late to the game on a lot of infrastructure initiatives, right? In the city. But you were mentioning how you're seeing this concept of garden suites and laneway housing extend beyond just Toronto, and right? And here we have proof that municipalities that are trying to be innovative, such as even Mississauga, this is huge that they're offering their own building plans to those who want to apply to help streamline the process, to make getting permits quicker, to help finishing construction sooner so that these units are available. I think that's pretty cool.
Hats off to the city of Mississauga, because when I saw that they've gone through it, and I actually talked to the city and the officials around this to get a little bit more information. So ultimately, they've came and said, we've approved these specific properties as long as you're maintaining the structure, you're maintaining everything that we've determined for plumbing, for kitchen. You're able to change the finishings as you please, but here you go. I think there's 3 different options that they've approved. Here are the 3 different options. You're going to get them approved. Go ahead and build it. And this has actually made the work for contractors and builders a little bit more easier, because now this could be a product, right? We're working on prefab modular designs that could be related to these designs, and we can offer them at a fixed price, off the shelf sort of approach.
Well, I'll say one of the future episodes coming up, we're actually going to do site visits with Ali. We'll show you some options that are available. But like you said, the cool part of this is that they're giving you a template. From experience, you build custom housing. I've helped clients build their own homes, buy homes, renovate homes. The step where you can spend the most amount of time and waste time at the same time is the planning and the architectural and designing phase. So I think this is great. It takes that frustration, that hurdle off of people's tables, and it just gets them to start building these units. So I think this is really cool. All right, let's check out our last headline in the news. And I think this is something close to home. This is something that I've been really trying to advocate for the last few years, where I think that there's huge opportunities for this demographics. I think, with the market slowing down, those who are seniors who are looking to downsize can really capitalize on equity building. And now this is a new strategy on building equity without having to sell your home, right? This lady here, after her spouse died, she just felt like the house was too big. She built herself a secondary unit in the backyard. And instead of now generating income from the backyard, she's living there herself, and she's generating more income for herself, her retirement, ample amount of income that even covers, let's say, if you took a line of credit against your existing house to build this. And, she says she couldn't be happier. She gets a new home. She's still on her property. She still has all her neighbors and friends nearby. And I think this is fantastic. I actually hope that we see a lot more of this use case.
One thing that's striking out, and this isn't necessarily for me to be cheeky or try to turn this into like a proper investment, but what really just came out right now in her case. So she's saying that her spouse passed away, right? Obviously, when you have a spouse and you've lived together for decades, there's in the same house even, there's a lot of memory components that are stuck to every inch of the house. This way, at least what I'm thinking maybe could be something, and maybe we could even interview her, is the fact that you're not far away from home, but you're in a new space, a new beginning, a new place that you're making memories in by yourself, with the new reality of life that you're dealing with. And then you can rent that space out. You can have other family members move into the old house that you're living in. So I think there's a few emotional components outside of the whole investment parameters that this touches on as
Oh, he's
well.
already thinking about commercials for his
I got a
business,
little
right?
emotional
We have
myself.
little testimonials about people loving to live in these units or why they
Yeah.
why they're so happy at building this, right? Whether it be for income or their own personal use. I love it, Ali. Uh, you know what? I think now is a good time to drop our own little blurb here. If you're considering if one of these garden suites or these laneway housings may be suitable for you, we have a link below. You can book a complimentary 15 qualification call. We take your address, we ask you a few questions about why you want to do it, and then we'll generate a free report for you as to what you can build, how long it would take. We'll give you the whole details. Again, me and Ali aren't here to promote our own businesses. We're here to help showcase why we think this is a fantastic opportunity for the city to not only maybe make a dent in the uh, housing issues that we have around unaffordability, but also help create returns for clients, investors, people who have these own homes. So having said that, Ali, let's now walk over actually a project that you had done. I think you said you have one that you did in Roncesvalles, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
let me post up the images here of what the house looked like beforehand, and then you can tell me and walk me through as to, why this certain individual wanted to build something along these lines, and how you guys came about to actually determine what the best use of the property was, like what we could actually do. So let's actually play a video first here, so you can talk about the property and we can see some use case
Perfect.
here.
So that's the backyard.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite projects.
So that's the existing house.
That's the existing house. Yeah, that's the back of the main house.
Let's play it
And
again.
so a little bit backstory. We connected with this individual through some of our offline marketing that we've had in the area. And he reached out and he had already basically understood what's required. He talked to another company and there was basically, he came prepared. He's a professional. He's working in a department with need services. Was that me?
I have no idea what happened there. I think I clicked the button, but that's funny. Okay, yeah.
No,
Keep going.
no.
All right.
Yeah, so a great
We have
individual.
real life bloopers on these episodes. None of these
Yeah,
are going to be cut out. We're just going to keep them as is.
it happens. It happens. It's raw, we come to you raw. So yeah, individual was a very, very professional individual, nice guy. He had a big family. And initially when he had reached out, when we asked him, like, what's the intention here? What do you want to do? The idea was that his family was really outgrowing the space. He had kids that were teenagers and going into university. And essentially, he wanted to use the space as a way of keeping them close. So we started the process with him. And right off the bat, there was a few challenges. There was a few things that needed to be considered. It's a great lot. It was about 17 wide, and we ended up getting about 1,000 square feet on this on 2 floors. So
And
this
this
was
and this is the shed that you knocked down, or
this
the
is the
garage.
old shed. Yeah, this is the old shed that we knocked down. And I'll say something very interesting about this shed after.
And there's a laneway in the back, correct?
Yeah, so this was a laneway project in the Roncesvalles area. Great neighborhood, fantastic area. So the first two challenges that they had, and maybe I can share this, maybe I can show you here on my page.
I've got one with the tree. Is that
Okay, we'll do the tree first. Yeah, so perfect. So this was pretty much 99% on his land. And clearly, you can see that that garage space was the garage space was about 17 feet. So we needed the extra space here where that tree is to turn it into the laneway suite. So there was a process. We had to get an arborist report. We ended up going with Davy Tree Services. Fantastic company. They came out very quickly. They took care of the entire process, the application. They sent it to the city. The city came and assessed it, and they realized it was unhealthy, and they removed it. They allowed for the removal, and Davy came back, and they basically got rid of the tree. Right. So few $100 for the application, few $100 for the visits, and then I think it was around $1,000 or $2,000 that they spent for.
So does the age of the tree have influence on whether or not it can be removed? Or are the city, because they're so pro density right now, they're a little bit more flexible when it comes to these laneway houses?
It's a controversial thing to say, but ultimately, city likes to. There's a few species that are protected, right? Age is important, and so is size. Size is probably one of the biggest deterring factors. But at the end of the day, if it's an unhealthy tree, then there's a process of getting rid of it. There is still trees that it's just not possible to remove, because there's some of them that are huge trunks across different areas. But it's something like this, which was, I think, about 12 inches or so, they were able to move it ultimately, and the health wasn't good as well. When we talked about access, when we talked about the fire safety requirement, there's two ways. There's one way of getting into the laneway from the laneway side, from the actual laneway road, or in most cases, from the side of the property itself. Now, in this case, the side of the property made the most sense because the fire hydrant was close by and they had this space. On the right side is my client's property. On the left side is their neighbor, obviously. And that line on the concrete in the middle, that's essentially the property line. That's what we found out as well, right? Like right in front of where the garbage is. So he was short because you needed to have 90 centimeters of clear space on the side of the house all the way, right? But he didn't have that, because you can see over here, there's a bay window that's sticking out, and the house sort of just turns and then it reduces the side access. However, because the combination of the space, if they were shared between him and his neighbor, met the 90 centimeters, they were able to get the limited distance agreement set in place.
Did you have to go and speak to the neighbors and get permission?
Absolutely, yeah. So part of it is just understanding that you have to have a good relationship with the neighbors. They're going to be involved, because essentially what you're doing, what this agreement is saying that, hey, we're going to create an as of right or an easement between these two properties for this specific distance, that if in the future there's ever a need for fire safety providers to access it, then they're able to walk onto your property. And if there's any liability issues that come up, the insurance companies, the mortgage companies, everybody is aware that, hey, these guys are allowed to do it. That's essentially what this is doing. It's a legal structure. You have to go through a real estate lawyer. And in this case, we worked with a knowledgeable real estate lawyer who knew what he was doing. And essentially, you have to create an agreement between you and your neighbor and the city. So it's a triangle, basically. The city also has to sign off on it, which they do, as long as they meet all the requirements. So there's a process, and the lawyer is the one who takes care of it. This was something that can take some time. So do that first thing as soon as you know, get that process started, because essentially without that LDA, you're not going to be able to get a city permit.
Okay, perfect. All right, so before we go into showing what you guys had designed, what the finished product looks like, just as a side note for a future episode, because I got asked this after our episode 1, we will do an episode where we talk about implications on insurance and how valuations post-construction looks like, you know, what you can do in terms with your lender in regards to refinancing. So we'll have a separate episode about that. But let's just finish off today's episode about use cases, why people are building these, with an example of what Ali did on that lot. And I think it's fantastic, Ali. You can speak to about who designed this and why you guys came up with this concept. Here, you'll see it right now on the screen.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is the project.
So that's what that shed got removed, and this is what you built instead.
Yeah, and essentially you see on the left side, that's what their shed also looked like. So we handled the entire design, permit process, engineering, everything for this project ourselves through our team and architect team. It was a very simple process because the client ultimately was very open to suggestions. He wanted to maximize the space. Lighting was very important for him, and then also parking. If you can see over here, if you see on the bottom, there's a circle and a flash. That space is ultimately part of his property. So we set back the front of the laneway suite about 8 or 9 feet, so that if you can see on the right side of my car, I don't know why it's in the picture, a car could easily fit in there, right? And it's still within your property. You're not parking in the laneway, which is prohibited. You're not allowed to be in the laneway side. But if it's your property and you have a deep lot, you're able to push it back, then you're able to create that space for parking. This was one of the key requirements, even though you don't need to have a parking space. It's not required by the city, but the client wanted it.
Basically, you can park outside on the slab, outside the front door right here.
Outside on the front door. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I have to say, the inside also, it looks great. It's very functional. Sometimes people don't understand what it means to build something new that you can't do on existing properties. Speak to us a little bit about the layout here. The first thing I'll showcase is this awesome kitchen that you built. And you can see it's bright. You got great ceiling heights.
Yes, exactly. So we went with an open concept layout. Just so that once you come into the property, you have the living area, you have a closet space, powder room, and then the kitchen in the back. And the slider door over here, we went with a custom slider door. And so it brings in, you can see it brings in a lot of light during the day.
Those were requirements of his that you were able to do here that you wouldn't have been able to do had you retrofitted, let's say, a basement or their main floor.
Well, look, the thing is, we're able
And
to
like
design.
you said, like this is fantastic. They've got so much storage. It's open concept.
Yeah, so right off the bat, when you come in on the right side, that's the closet space, and then beside it is the bench, and then right beside that, that's the powder room. We went with a nice pocket door in there just to keep things very compact. And then right under the staircase, that's where the utility room is.
Room unit, Ali,
This was a 2 bedroom, yeah, so 500 on each floor.
has its own laundry, has its own full bathroom upstairs.
Full functioning house. Full functioning house. You can see the island over here. We got a nice cantilever on 2 sides. It's great for basically using it as maybe a secondary dining table if you want. But even if you were to add a dining table,
You have
you're able
ample
to do
space.
that, and have very nice, like a large sofa and entertainment area closer to the entry. So there's a lot of ways that you can play around with the design. And we pushed basically the staircase all the way to the back so that you can achieve basically this look and all of these functions that you see in this shot.
Okay, awesome. So run through the numbers. How large, how much it cost to build, and what did they eventually end up renting for?
This project basically from A to Z is about 1,000 square feet. We priced it at just in the mid 400,000 range. I think it was around the 430 to 440. Basically, that included our permit fees for getting the architectural package done. That also included the construction. So turnkey, that's the key component. The wording is turnkey. So we handled the entire purchasing, labor, and the construction side of things. Once it was done, it went on the market right away because he realized, he's like, look, I'm going to rent it out for the time being. He ended up putting it for $4,250 a month. Within 2 to 3 weeks, he got a very good professional tenant that moved into his space, and so far, so good.
So for an investment of under $500,000, generating over $50,000 in yearly rental income. So let's give or take a 10.5% return. That's fantastic, right? And that's something that you're actually outperforming the stock market if you think about it in most scenarios with that type of investment. I think that's great. I think this is a good purview as to how people are creatively using their backyards, their laneways to generate value, to generate income, and to solve, housing issues that they may have internally within their own families, or help solve the housing issues of Ontario, Toronto community. So I think this is great. I think the next episode, we should kind of dive more into, you know, possible sites that may be suitable. How about that, Ali? Why don't we jump on the internet live? We can pick a site and you can tell us, hey, I think this is what can be built here. I'll go over, yeah, you know what, if we do something like this is what can be rented out for. And we can come up with hypothetical case use situations and numbers. So people can see that this can kind of been applied all over Toronto. It's not just a downtown case. Yes, Ali showed a downtown project, but you got to understand, all municipalities need this right now. They all want this right now. So this is applicable to anybody who has extra space in the back. And I think, simply put, that's all that is really required. And then the rest, you call Ali and his team, or you call other builders and contractors and consultants, and they'll tell you exactly what can be done. But from your side, all you need is a need. You need to have access to the finances, and then just give Ali a call, right?
For sure, there are certain parameters that need to be met, right? But again, working with someone who's gone through this multiple times, who has the experience, just ultimately will allow for a seamless approach and get this done for you.
And I think that's the key word: experience. Experience in understanding the markets, experience in understanding construction. That's why we kind of joined forces. And that's the reason, a lot of people ask me after episode 1 is, how are you guys going to make a series about this? Like, what is there to really talk about? And just, Ali touched on issue about financing. We're going to dive into every nuance on how you can make money from your backyard or from your laneway. And we're going to do our best and our, most humble approach in just trying to make it simple. And I'm actually looking forward to it. I love what we're going to do for episode 3, even though I just came up with it on the spot, Ali, but that's what we're going to do.
Right.
And like we had mentioned in episode 1, this is going to be a weekly thing. So thank you for listening us. We have a lot of value to give. And thank you, Ali, for your time.
Thank you. As always, a pleasure.
All right. We'll see you guys on episode 3.
See you next week.